assume it's going to be much louder in a couple seconds. So I think we can get started. Let's do a coin flip. So one representative. I'm just going to pick a name from each team for decide who is going to be heads and tails. So let's do Faizan and Fatima. You guys can decide which heads or tails if your team is going to be. So team A, what do you guys think?
Okay, I call tails. Team A calls tails.
Okay, I guess we're just heads then.
Team tails. Okay. So I have a coin here from it, and I'm going to flip it. It is heads. Okay, so the team going 4, if I'm correct, Faizan, that's your team. That is team A. All right, if no one has any questions, then awesome. So team A, you can call upon your representative and begin your introduction.
Sorry, I have a question. Team A is for GMO or for organic?
Sorry, for GMO.
Okay, cool. That's me.
Perfect.
All
Can I, just for the sake of video, can I actually put everybody's videos off and only the 3 participants of that team on so that we can have you guys on doing your back and forth, and whoever then talks turns their video on. Is that okay, or am I going to confuse everything?
So only the team that's presenting has their video on.
No, but yeah, that's my suggestion. It doesn't have to be done that way. Is that okay? Does anybody see any problems with that? Okay, let's just do that.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah.
Okay, Bismillah. This house believes that GMO vegetables are better than organic vegetables. First, I'll be going over the definitions for this debate. Then, GMOs in our daily lives, and then 2 points for how GMOs are better than organic vegetables. So for the purpose of this specific debate, GMOs will be defined as any organism whose genetic material has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. And organic vegetables will be defined as those that naturally occur in nature, so their genetic genome has not been altered. Genetic modification of vegetables has been going on for ages, and even major science phenomena like Mendel's peas for genetic crossing have foundations in genetic modification. Mendel was a biologist, and in 1866, he published his work demonstrating the actions of invisible factors, now called genes, determining the traits of an organism. Mendel selected peas for their shape, color, and bred different types of peas, for instance, yellow, green, round, or wrinkled peas. Similarly, different vegetables have come about the same way. Brassica oleracea, or wild mustard, has been bred to produce 6 different types of vegetables. One selected for its leaves is what we know as kale. When it's for its stems and flowers, it's broccoli. When it's for its flower clusters, it's cauliflower. And when it's for its terminal buds, it's cabbage. Now for my 2 arguments. So the first one is GMO vegetables are much cheaper than organic vegetables. This is important because families can't afford the higher priced organic vegetables, especially during this global pandemic. There have been families that have been living paycheck to paycheck forever, but that has increased due to this global pandemic and all our working conditions that we're going through. To illustrate my point, I searched up grape tomatoes at Walmart. So grape tomatoes go for about $2.80 at Walmart, while organic tomatoes go for about $3.60, both for 283 grams. Now that is a 1.5% increase in the price for the exact same breed of tomatoes. GMO vegetables can also be more nutritious, which is very important, especially in developing countries. One example of biotechnology that has been used is golden rice. Approximately 140 million children in low-income households in 118 countries, especially in Africa and Southeast Asia, have vitamin A deficiency. The World Health Organization reports that an estimated 250,000 to 500,000 vitamin A deficient children become blind every year, and nearly half of them die within 12 months of losing their sight. However, researchers in Germany and Switzerland created golden rice, which contains 3 new genes, 2 from daffodil and 1 from a bacterium, which helps promote provitamin A. With the introduction of golden rice, the affected cases of vitamin A deficiency has dropped to almost half of what it was before. But golden rice is just one among hundreds of new biotech products which illustrate the contributions of biotechnology to society. Thank you.
Thank you, Roa. Now the representative from Team B can start with their introduction.
So over several years, GMOs have started to be used across the globe. And with some of the leading export countries, such as the United States, who are modifying their foods, the impact of these GMOs is even greater as other nations import these modified foods. And so scientific examples such as the genetically modified sheep, the beloved Dolly, who endured hardship for her entire life and then died a painful death after only a couple of years, is an example of why we think that these GMOs are not, the best. And so the widespread use of GMOs is concerning to us as a team for several reasons, which we will be discussing later today. And we need to address the long-term environmental factors, the complication of interfering with the natural process of gene expression, and of course, the socioeconomic factors as well that, what are the negative effects of GMOs on our economy? So our focus today is mainly on the environmental, health-related, and economic impacts of these GMOs, and that is why we are against them.
Perfect. Thank you, Fatima. Okay, so let's bring it back to Team A. Now is your chance to call upon all the members of your team and present your argument in whatever format you had prepared.
Okay, then I guess I can start off with some of our arguments. So one big benefit of using GMO crops is that it helps with food security. As Aurora previously mentioned, those in poor communities who have stuff like vitamin deficiencies, right? They don't have efficient access to staple foods to actually keep them, nutritious and in healthy condition, That's why using GMOs, it allows them to have enough food to not only just stay alive, but maintain their bodies in healthy condition. Okay, so do I just say one argument or do I list them?
You can present whatever arguments you have right now.
Okay, so I present them all. So a big plus to GMOs is that it uses more productive and spacious animal farm. So for example, especially with meat production, you need a lot of space just to raise cattle and all of that. But if you use GMOs, there's less environmental damage. For example, one example of this would be special genes that raise the milk yield of cattle. Another big plus about GMOs is less use of external pesticides. Now, this is a big issue with farmers, especially those in poor regions, because they can easily have pesticides, vaccinated and sprayed on their bodies, and sometimes there's not always good access, to cures for these types of things. So what GMOs do is they have pesticides built into the actual plant. Now, that may seem a bit like, wow, what? But the thing is that it's in just a safe amount that it's safe to humans, but it's not toxic. But it's still toxic to bugs. So for example, take coffee, right? For us, a drug we use all the time to boost our productivity, but originally coffee is actually an insecticide. So it's the same premise there. And yeah, that's more or less the main 3 arguments I would like to talk about now.
Is there anyone else from Team A that wants to present their argument?
Would we be able to do rebuttals right now, or would that come later?
Yeah, that will come later. Like right now, we're just presenting our first line of arguments, and
Okay.
then we can do that after. So, okay, so so that's your first line. Team B, now is your chance to present your first line of arguments, and you also get the chance to respond to any of the points that Team A brought up. You can start in whatever order that you planned.
So we're going to talk about two factors. One of them is going to be why we're against GMOs, and we're also going to be talking about the benefit of organic foods. So I'm going to talk about the impact on the environment of GMO foods. But then Fatima is going to go into human health, and then Ibrahim will be going into socioeconomic factors. So
I'm doing human health.
Sorry. Ibrahim's
Sorry,
going to human health, and then Fatima's going to socioeconomic
Right.
factors. And then, okay, so I'll start with impact on environment. So first of all, we need to disclose the negative impact of GMO that's on the non-target organisms. For example, we know that North America has a strong population of monarch butterflies. However, because of the expansion of GM herbicide, that has destroyed the habitat of organic butterflies, and the populations have decreased by 90%. We also know that every GMO or every organism, plant more likely, gives off pollen and other contributions, such as dead leaves or stems or whatever it is. And those contain toxins from the genetically engineered insect resistant, whatever it is. So one example is that the corn, often it is genetically engineered to ensure that insects and other pests don't get access to it. However, the pollen from the corn is going into the streams, and that's causing an increased mortality and a reduced growth in aquatic insects, which are essential to the life cycle and the way an ecosystem works. GMO is also the leading cause of the evolution of pest-resistant or herbicide-resistant weeds, and an increased population as well. And we know that weeds take away from the nutrients of our crops. And so what is the benefit of using GMO? Is it short-term or long-term? Because then we see that these weeds are becoming stronger. And in the last 20 years alone, 37 weed species have developed a resistance to glyphosate, which is a popular herbicide used. And so the only choice we have now is we either choose a stronger herbicide, which with an even higher increase of negative consequences on our crops, on our food, in levels of cancer or whatever it is, or we can just stop using GMO and try to restabilize that balance that's found. Another impact on the environment is that insects have developed the strong resistance against the toxins. And this is a report that's as updated as May 2019. And it says that contamination that's from GM plants have serious ecological, economic, and social implications. And so the genetic implications alone of interfering with gene expression, protein coding, or whatever it is, has significant risks to the non-GM foods and the organic farming, and such as in wheat and pigs and canola and flax crops. And the thing is that all living organisms use the same 4 amino acids. And so the way they interact, nucleotides. So the way they interact is essential to everything else about it. And so Ibrahim will go into human health.
Okay, so when looking into the impacts of the impact of GMOs on human health. After genetically modified foods were introduced in the United States a few decades ago, people independently reported toxic effects caused by GMOs. One example is an anti-GMO advocacy group called the Institute for Responsible Technology, the IRT, which reported that rats fed a diet containing a GMO potato had virtually every organ system adversely affected after just 10 days of feeding. They claimed that the process of making the GMO caused it to be toxic, and thus all GMOs were high risk for toxicity. The second point is that several NGO and media organizations are implicably opposed to GM plants. Some researchers believe that eating GMO foods can contribute to the development of cancer. They argue that because the disease is caused by mutations in the DNA, it is dangerous to introduce new genes into the body. The American Cancer Society, the ACS, have said that there is no evidence for this. However, they note that no evidence of harm is not the same as proof of safety. The third point is that there's a concern that genetic modification, which can boost a crop's resistance to disease or make it more tolerant to herbicides, could affect the ability of people to defend against illness. There is a small chance that the genes in food can transfer to cells into the body or bacteria in the gut. Some GMO plants contain food genes that make them resistant to certain antibiotics. This resistance could pass on to humans. There's growing concern that globally, they're increasingly resistant to antibiotics. My last point is outcrossing refers to the risk of genes from certain GMO plants mixing with those of conventional crops. There have been reports of low levels of GMO crops approved as animal feed or for industrial use being found in food meant for human consumption. And those are my points, and I'm going to pass it off to Fatima.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the effects of GMOs on our economy. So first of all, these biotechnology corporations try to profit from these GMOs and start to gain control over the farming systems. So there's always that concern of powerful companies having market dominance in these agricultural sectors, and this would obviously negatively impact small-scale farmers. So they would begin to fear that they'd have to pay for crop varieties that are being bred from genetic material, which originally came from their own crops. And there are several other expenses that farmers will have to factor in when GMOs become involved. So, for example, it's very expensive for organic farmers to avoid contamination. So when you have these added costs, as well as the large scale companies dominating the market, small scale farmers might shy away from this sector. And so also, if the farmers are heavily dependent on exporting their output, these GMOs might not work to their benefit. So a country who these farmers want to export to, they might be imposing like protectionist policies because they don't want the negative health impacts of these GMOs to affect their citizens. And so this would decrease the demand of these farmers' outputs to those imported countries. And obviously it decreases their revenue as well. So the effect of this on the economy is that the agricultural sector accounts for 6.7% of Canada's total GDP. And so a potential decrease in farmers' output and revenue would obviously have a significant impact on the economy as a whole. A low GDP might lead to like unemployment and therefore a decrease in household incomes, which lessens the consumption of households across the nation. And in essence, the economy begins to shrink. And then secondly, the nature of GMOs is that they can be patented. So this means these large scale companies like these biotechnological firms, they have more power and profits from these patents. So any farmer who might want to use these GMOs first has to sign contracts and pay licensing fees and even allow the seed companies to inspect their farms. And these farmers can also get sued for seed piracy when an unauthorized GMO appears in their fields. So these patents make it very difficult for independent research to proceed. And for developing countries and their economy, this is like a negative effect because though these countries who do not already have like private research initiatives in place, they need like new research to kind of further their economy and grow, because research is a key factor in economic growth. So when these patents limit the research, it has an adverse effect on the economy. And then lastly, you also have to take into consideration the terminator technologies that become involved when you have GMOs. So these are basically like the suicide seeds that are used to restrict the use of genetically modified plants. So if you start applying these terminator technologies to crops, it would prevent farmers from saving seeds to be reused in the next season. And terminator genes can also contaminate crops. So then the farmers will like unknowingly save and reuse contaminated seeds that won't germinate. So this would obviously have a negative impact on the economy because it restricts the farmer's output, and obviously there's no revenue coming in, no profits being made. So yeah.
Another thing we want to point in really quickly, and as Muslim, like one of the things that we should be considering in everything is Islamic perspective. And so we have two main points, and one of them is that we're encouraged to eat food that is good and pure and everything. So if we are kind of playing around with how things are, does that really make the food tayyib, which is what we're encouraged to do? Another thing is we're told to learn about all of what Allah has created, right? So are we allowed to, if we're genetically engineering something, we're essentially interfering with God's nature of things. So are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to take a living thing and dictate what we want and what we don't want, and basically disrupt the entire ecosystem, the entire natural order of things, just for our personal gain? And the thing is, it's not like we have a lack of resources per se, we just have a lack of people willing to work with third world countries, with all of these different places, in order to ensure that everyone gets nutrients. And essentially it's all business, it's all economic factors. So where do we balance humanity with economic factors? And I know we're running out of time, so thank you so much for listening to our arguments, and we're excited to hear the rebuttals.
All right. So just a quick note, to not disrupt the flow, if time is running out, I will message you individually. So we've got environmental damage, pesticides, economic impact, species population, Team A, your time to shine. What are your responses to this in your argument?
So Team B mentioned that organic vegetables are natural, and we have a rebuttal for this. So there really isn't such thing as natural food, because humans have actually been modifying the genes of plants and animals for millions of years. Now it's just a lot more customizable and efficient. A lot of food that we've come to love today has been modified due to selective breeding, such as bananas, broccoli, corn, and more. You also said that GMOs are patented. Yes, many of them are patented, but so are many non-GMO crops. Pluots didn't just drop out of the sky. Someone had to work for years to develop those tasty treats. So they are patented varieties. Not all GMOs are patented. There are open source GMOs, and there are also GMOs where organizations have worked with private enterprises to give away seeds on humanitarian grounds, such as golden rice. So using the GMOs are patented excuse makes no more sense than saying that you don't like electronics because Windows is under a copyright. Team B also mentioned that GMOs cause superweeds. For your information, GMOs that carry traits for herbicide tolerance can lead to weeds that develop tolerance to the herbicide, known as superweeds. However, superweeds are far from being an issue unique to GMOs, and even pulling weeds by hand can lead to weeds that look like the crop itself, known as mimicry. The issue of superweeds is a serious one, and this database tracks herbicide-resistant weeds as they develop across different nations. Reducing it to a GMO-specific problem and severely narrowing the scope of the issue deters the effort of finding genuine solutions to the problem. So using GMOs cause superweeds excuse makes no more sense than saying that you don't like computers because they can lead to electric shocks, when the issue is much more broader in scope.
Any more responses from Team A?
I can go. So Team B originally mentioned in their very beginning introduction that Dolly, oh, sorry, I forgot my video. Sorry. Okay, so that Dolly was the, we talked about Dolly, the sheep who was the very first clone, and they mentioned it as an argument against genetic modification and how it died a painful death. However, it's very important to note that Dolly only died a painful death not because of genetic modification itself, but because it was the very first clone. This is how many experiments unfortunately go in science. We need organisms to experiment on. And Dolly was one of the very unfortunate experiments that we had to do. And it's sad because we do get attached to animals and everything, but it is important because they are working to do this on humans eventually, and we need to see the side effects of it first on an animal. They also mentioned, Team B, that GMOs use a lot of pesticides. However, according to Cornell University, farmers reduced pesticide spraying by 776 million kilograms between 1996 and 2018 by adopting GMO crops. And the way they were able to do this is because GMO crops have a gene inside of them, which is called IR, so insect-resistant genes, and herbicide-tolerant traits. Organic farming doesn't have this, which requires the external use of herbicide and pesticide. So technically, all the harm and the damage they were talking about is caused by their own farming techniques, because it does make sense. When you use more herbicide, when you use more pesticides, the insects or whatever feed on them, they do start to mutate. They start to be immune to whatever herbicide or pesticide we're using, and that way we have to keep using stronger and stronger doses of it. The same thing, DDT was huge back in Canada way before, and it's still in our systems, even though we haven't, like, a lot of us weren't even born before while DDT was still in use, but it's still in our systems today because it's still in our environment. But that is not the product of genetic modification of organisms. That is the product of herbicides and pesticides in our environment to this day. Team B also brought up an amazing organization, the IRT. However, I didn't have to look very far, and the IRT was first funded in 2003, and it has knowingly spread fear and misinformation about biotechnology since it was founded. So for instance, one of its claims that's been famous and it's been going around everywhere that I've heard growing up as well is that GMOs cause autism. However, a lot of scientific research has been done, and GMOs do not cause autism because autism is a genetic modification in humans. Autism is caused by trisomy 21, so there's an extra chromosome in the human genome, not caused by whatever food we eat. Jeffrey Smith is the person who leads the IRT, and he has claimed through the organization that cancer patients are essentially better off by not using modern medicine. And I know that this doesn't relate directly to our debate, but it is important to see the crazy misinformation he's been spreading around for literally not that long ago. For the specific modern medicine causes cancer or doesn't, that cancer patients are essentially better off by not using modern medicine. We can see that in the Journal of National Cancer Institute, a very well-known journal that almost every science student out there uses for our studies. And there was a study by Ross Promero, and that specifically states after 5 years of experimentation, essentially, 78.3% of subjects who received conventional treatments, so modern medicine, were still alive, and only 54.7% of subjects who use alternative medicine were alive. So you can see the drastic effect that modern medicine does work. And that is the point I'm trying to get at, because Jeffrey uses such crazy accusations against medicine, or really anything for responsible technology, which is ironic because the institute is called Institute for Responsible Technology. So it's crazy. It's almost as if he's going against himself with the organization. And another thing is that one of our major principles for Islam is to ensure that everyone is well fed. Growing up, I very clearly remember we would be going out giving our neighbors iftar. In the masjid even, we would go and we would in the masjid, we would go, and I remember as a little child, I'd be handing out dates to people. Be like, here, you can break your fast with this. I remember volunteering for different organizations, and we would be going out and feeding the homeless. And that is what Islam is about. Islam is about making sure your brothers and sisters don't go hungry. There's even a hadith about this, to make sure that your neighbor never goes hungry. So is it really fair in any capacity to reject people of such a basic human resource? Is it fair to say, well, we don't want GMO products, but it's making life so much better for individuals. It's making food more affordable. And if we don't have food, those individuals would die. Going off of that, so people would literally die without the use of genetic modified organisms. And so connecting it back, because I recently just talked about a bit about medicine, a bit about cancer, so connecting it back to science, because genetically modified organisms or any vegetables that we grow, anything is technically a science. It's a science and how it works, from photosynthesis to how much sunlight it needs to how much water it needs. It's a science. Going back to science, our roots, insulin, something that so many people need. In America alone, there's so many people that need insulin. There's so many people that need type 2 diabetes. I'm doing an internship right now, and 1 in 3 people in another country, in Fiji, 30% of their population has type 2 diabetes. That is so many people. And they don't have enough insulin. Insulin is genetically modified as well. People don't get insulin, they would die. We have to get amputated. People have limbs cut off. They have to go through dialysis. They go blind. So are we saying that genetically modified organisms are bad? Because so many things that so many people rely on. I know so many people in my own family that rely on insulin to get through day-to-day life, just because it's needed. Without insulin there, I wouldn't have some of my family members. So insulin is also genetically modified, and it is so important to our daily lives. Genetically modified organisms, they've become a part of us. It was mentioned before. I actually mentioned it in my introduction, that stuff like broccoli, kale, corn, cauliflower, all that stuff is genetically modified essentially, because that stuff does not exist in nature. That stuff has been bred by humans. So where would the difference be between GMO foods and organic foods? So GMO is brought up, and everyone thinks that it's this crazy technology of, like, I don't know, robots or something that are going to go into our bloodstream and kill everything and alter our own DNA. Food can't do that. Food doesn't go inside of you and it's like, well, delete this mutation, add another mutation there. I don't know, add some more ATCGs. Food doesn't do that. Food is to sustain you. Food is how you would get up in the morning again. The same science has been using for organic vegetables, the same science that's used for GMOs. The only difference, and the very key difference that people refuse to understand, is organic vegetables. So we have a nice little piece of, let's say, corn. We have a nice little, actually corns are genetically modified. Let's say tomatoes. We have a nice little piece of tomato. And to make sure that tomato grows properly, to make sure insects don't get to it, what do we do to it? We add fertilizer, we add pesticides, we add herbicides to it. Now, a GMO tomato, on the other hand, has all of that already inside of it. So it doesn't go anywhere else inside our environment. So it doesn't go anywhere else inside our environment. And it's actually benefiting our environment because our bodies can deal with it. But our environment can't. We're killing so many animals, so many fish, just because of the herbicides and the pesticides that we're putting into our environment. And those organisms, unfortunately, cannot deal with it. So that is a problem, because it's the same stuff. It's the exact same process, but GMOs, they have to go through so many different techniques and so many different boards of government to get to the point where they are, where we can all essentially eat them and enjoy them, that it doesn't make sense why some people would refuse to eat genetically modified organisms, because they're so common in our day-to-day lives that they're fine. So that is why.
Thank you for that, Roa. I'm going to stop you there because it has been time.
Okay.
So we've got open source GMOs, harmful farming techniques, root causes, false claims, Team B, what are your thoughts and your rebuttals on this?
Okay, so based on the points that both Yusuf and Rojo said, there was a point at the very beginning, selective breeding. Selective breeding is still natural though, because you choose essentially, that's what humans do as well. You don't just mate with anybody. You choose the one you're most compatible with, the one that you believe has all the type of, I don't know, characteristics that you want, and there's some association. That's just how kind of nature works. You take the qualities you like and you try to replicate it in the future. And that's essentially what offspring are, whether that's plants, whether that's animals, whether that's humans. And so there was a technology comparison as well. That was a little confusing since we're talking about real living organisms and not technology. But Again, he's right. We should be focusing on the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is that we shouldn't be continuing something if we know there's harmful impacts, right? We should be trying to fix the problem before that's continued on. Roa said insulin is genetically modified, and you're right. But the thing is that insulin is naturally produced in the pancreas. That when people take insulin is because they don't produce enough of it. And so that's a matter of life and death, right? Are you gonna be able to take the supplements and save yourself, which is what a medicine is anyway. You take any type of booster, any type of chemical, whatever it is, that is an agreement with the genes that you produce, with the protein codes that you produce in your body naturally, and you try to fight the pathogens or the deficiencies within your body. That's seen with when you take an iron supplement, whether you take vitamin D supplement, whether you take insulin, that's just what happens. There is a research article from the U.S. National Library of Medicine from the National Institute of Health. This journal in particular is a J Food Science Technology, and says that there has been a proven correlation with the development of disease and how humans that are immune to antibiotics and have seen a direct influence on the effects of human body. And so it's shown how these new inventions are not like the gene codes that are within these genetically modified organisms are not naturally found within the organisms that are produced naturally. And another thing is that we're not arguing for organic or for locally developed. We're arguing against GMOs. So in spite of that, I know we didn't really mention anything about organic foods, but essentially we're just against GMO. And so that's why another thing you said is that we should try to aim for food security for everyone. The thing is, in North America alone, we create how much percent of the waste? 70% of the waste of the world. North America, if it was actually concerned about food security, they would stop heavy sanctions on third world countries, developing countries. We would stop trying to it's all politics. We're not trying. There are certain organizations that aim for the food security and the development of people, making sure people don't go hungry. But that's the organizations that are doing GMO, that are patenting or GMO and all that. It's not saying a company that is trying to fight food security. You wouldn't necessarily patent something that is fighting food insecurity, just like how for the vaccine. We live in a world that a vaccine is patented, even though we're trying to find a cure. Do you see how it's not necessarily because people want to do good, it's because of the business aspect. People want to increase profits. They don't want to give people hungry people food. Otherwise, people who are freezing in the winter on the streets of downtown Toronto within Canada would have access to food. People in Northern Ontario would have access to clean water. Our natives would have access to the lands that they were given in the treaty. It's not about food insecurity. It's about business. Again, something that was, I don't know if we touched on this, but the cross-pollination of these GMOs will impact the environment. And so as matter decomposes, as the organic foods decompose, those genetically resistant genes will be consumed by other organisms, whether it would be the pests, whether it would be the different herbs, whether it be our own selves and the human body as it's absorbed into the water. And so our body doesn't know how to deal with those genes. Another issue I have with GMO organizations is that there's a lack of disclosure. As you said, we're surrounded by GMO, and most GMO organizations don't even don't disclose whether they are GMO or not. And so that shows that there's obviously something negative happening if they don't want to disclose their information. A lack of transparency in a company is never good. And so we need to, and how you said Dolly was a unfortunate example, that's where we have to decide, when are we going to cross the line of humanity? So we're saying that we're trying to save many humans' lives, but in reality, that golden rice example you gave is one example of humans trying to make a difference. Because again, how I said, there wouldn't be starving people in America. There wouldn't, 3% of America's population wouldn't be richer than the entire 50% of the US citizens. And so that shows it's not about GMO. A lot of its business side is not about food insecurity. While I'm sure there's people with good intentions, it's about business. And from a humanity standpoint, from an Islamic standpoint, it's not good. Thank you. That's our rebuttal. I don't know if Fatima or Ibrahim wants to add something.
Yeah, you have 4 minutes left. So for Team B, you can add anything.
If we do have time, I'm just going to add some information why the pesticides thing was kind of important. There was a large number quoted, but it essentially only reduced 8.2% of the use of pesticide, because while GMO does have genes that are resistant to or what was it, pesticide resistance or whatever it was, the reality is that a lot of organisms, we can't exactly control whether that protein is being coated on or off. So what happens is that farmers generally do have to use pesticide anyway. And the thing is that pesticide, the reason why those genetically engineered crops have those have herbicide resistance within their within the genetic code, it's because they have to use it anyway. And because they have to use pesticides anyway, in order for an increase in crops, we see that they're trying to build essentially resistance. Like those pesticides are being used anyway. And so the GMO, while it does reduce by 8.2%, it's not significant enough to show that it has significantly decreased the use of pesticides.
Perfect, thank you. Now let us go back to Team A. We're going to conclude with all of this. This is your final chance to present your rebuttals, your arguments, your final concluding points. And at the end, one of the members of your group can wrap it all up. So Team A, go ahead, take it away.
Wait, is this the conclusion or is this just like the second rebuttal? Like,
this is both. So you do your rebuttal, all your arguments, and then you can end with your conclusion.
Okay. So I'll start at the beginning. So Malika, you said that technology doesn't make sense when we're talking about GMOs, but we're just using technology as an analogy here. And then also you said that insulin, right? It makes sense because it's life or death. But GMOs are also life and death, especially for poor people who can't afford to pay for expensive organic foods. And another big point you had was that GMOs are all about business. But in reality, so is the whole crop market. Everything is always a business. And to use another technology analogy, It's like you're opposing Apple just because it makes lots of money from their smartphones. And then also you said how GMOs, there's some lack of transparency, you know? So while yes, that may be true, the majority of GMOs are actually made like publicly. And today, more than 64 countries have laws that specifically require GMO labeling on straw products. Also, another point you said is that the pesticides, like the decreasing of them, is not significant enough. However, it's not just decreasing pesticides, but it's doing what pesticides just couldn't do, which is just a convenient measure to help crops. So, for example, take the ring spot virus in Hawaii, right? The whole papaya industry was about to be wiped out, but then GMOs helped and save it. So, although yes, in a way, you could also have used pesticides to help, kill the bugs that were spreading the disease. GMOs did it in a safe and efficient manner, so farmers only had to worry about growing more crops and not, oh, did I buy enough pesticide to fight off these viruses? And also, as you said before, selective breeding. So again, GMOs is kind of like the next step. With organic food, we've already been developing it for like the past tens of thousands of years in human history. We've been craving it, like we've been making it to how we want to our liking. GMOs is just simply the next step since our science advanced after the Industrial Revolution. It's still the same thing. We're still catering crops and making them more to our liking, but now we just have better tools to do that.
Sorry for that. I'm just going to quickly correct myself here. So these 10 minutes are for you guys to present your rebuttals, and then you're going to do the conclusion after Team A has their conclusion. Does that make sense? Or Team B? Sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, so you have a couple more minutes to answer all of the points that your opposing team had.
So sorry, do we get a chance to do rebuttal then?
No, after this is going to be your conclusion and then Team B's conclusion.
Oh, okay.
So is there anything else from Team A? Any more arguments? Rebuttals?
I think for now that's it.
Okay, awesome. So now we're going to wrap up, or else we're going to keep going back and forth, which is also a good thing. But back to Team B. So we are going to, yes, to Team B. This is your chance to respond to any final points and basically say your conclusion and wrap up your final points.
Okay, so I can go. So firstly, I just want to stress that we aren't completely for organic foods. We're solely just arguing against GMOs. And also just to summarize my points on the implications of GMOs on the economy. In general, it would have an adverse effect because, you're kind of diminishing the output of these small scale farmers, and to a lot of rural areas and just areas in general, small scale farmers are an integral part of the economy. And also, even if we were to take an organic food standpoint and just healthier foods in general, they might be more expensive than GMOs, but you can also think of it long term. For the economy, it might be better because when you have citizens who are consuming foods that are healthier, you have a healthy nation as a whole. And this would provide for a more efficient and productive economy. And yeah, Malika and Ibrahim, do you want to add and summarize your points?
Yes, so we could just conclude in as a whole. Ibrahim, do you want to do that or should I do that?
I really have nothing to add. I mean, basically, yeah, everything that Malika and Fatima said about how GMOs, like the impacts of health, environment, and how, the different types of effects they have on the economy. It's all, I agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the main things is that we can't just because something's in its early stages doesn't mean we should just go ahead with it anyway. There should be rigorous testing to know the impact on human health, to know the impact on environment. And these stats that we do have, they should be taken seriously, because as a whole, we already know the world, like climate change is such a huge environmental factor. We know deforestation is increasing. We know all of these other environmental factors is contributing to this. And so really we can't afford for any more issues. We need to just solve the issue. And I'm sure the intentions of GMO are amazing, but the implications have other consequences and implications that we've discussed today. And rather than repeat them, which we've already done to some degree, the main concern is just human health, environmental health, and ensure that everything is as human as possible, because we need to make sure we hold on to our humanity. And I'm sure how some points have been said that everything is a business at the end of the day. That's essentially the issue, is that we shouldn't be putting a number on something that people need to survive. And insulin, while it is a natural thing, again, that's another point that was discussed, it's a matter of life and death. Humans naturally produce it. We know that it doesn't have adverse effects if it's in a controlled quantity. And it's been kind of momentous in the success of World War I, in the success of human, like it's literally been, what's the word? Like an incredulous discovery that's been made. And that was through proper process. Thank you so much. That's our conclusion. And yeah.
All right, thank you. And final conclusion from Team A. You can wrap up your point.
Okay. In summary, we believe GMOs to be the superior choice than organic foods due to its higher nutrition capability, increased productivity, and cost efficiency. They also reduce the use of more dangerous or harmful pesticides, and they allow families in poor regions to have something to eat on the table. Just as we have been modifying crops for hundreds of thousands of years, GMOs are simply the next step in that process. It is the future of agriculture and husbandry.
All right, thank you everyone. Thank you debaters, thank you judges, spectators. Round of applause for everybody. I wish I could do it in person, but I mean, there's an emoji, you can do it on the thing. Yes, this is perfect, thank you. Thank you so much everyone. Now we're going to give the judges some time. These judges, we're gonna put them in a breakout room, if I'm not mistaken. Give them some time to talk over it, and then we'll go through the video. So is the breakout room already set? Or you're just gonna go with them?
Do that, or you can make me host and I can create the breakout room really quickly.
Oh yes, that would be.
If and Nicola and Jennifer, I'm just gonna actually really quickly introduce Nicola because she joined a little bit late and we weren't able to introduce her. So thank you so much, Nicola, for joining us. And Nicola is an ecological farmer and permacultural designer whose focus is on growing medicinal plants in a way that promotes the health of the whole ecosystem, with humans being a part of it. She's been small-scale organic farming for over 10 years and is inspired to begin working in a restoration model of food systems after completing her BA in political science at the University of Guelph. And I'm sure just because she does organic farming, that will not have anything to do with how she judges today's debate, because that's about how you presented your arguments. So we're going to actually go right on to the breakout room. We'll have some discussion there while you guys have yours on the side, and we'll come back probably in about 5 to 7 minutes. Is that okay? All right, so Javeria, I would need either access as a host. You'll have to make me host or create a breakout room. So on the participant side where it says my name. Okay, great, thank you.
in the meantime, I know that I definitely saw the debate took so many different turns that I didn't realize that they were going to. Like I learned so much, not only about GMOs and organic, but about how it affects how you have to think about the economy, think about technology and that kind of relationship. So that was really interesting. Thank you for that. I think you guys deserve like a 5-minute break to cool
Nicola,
down.
you need to join. Sorry, Nicola, you need to join the room. It's gonna
Oh,
tell
do
you.
I need to take okay, take an invitation?
What's that?
Oh, I need do we need to join a separate room for the judging right now, or
Yeah, I've sent the judges there. Or were you also doing the?
so you initially, yeah, I think you initially had mentioned it, so I don't know if like still like that, like considering like I was also like a mentor if I should, but
Yeah, I wasn't
like,
sure. If
I have my
Depends
2
on the
cents
form.
if you want to give if they want my 2 cents.
Why don't you give them your 2 cents on this side, where else I'll let the judges go over there. I'll just quickly join them to make sure they're on.
Sure. I mean, I can give like some general feedback to folks. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. One thing you guys always need to remember, like when we're having these like debates about like, you know, one thing versus another, is like when people kind of like get into their teams, like you guys will naturally develop this mindset like there can be only one. But really, the world's a complex place, and there's a lot of different problems we need to solve, and there's generally room for, you know, multiple, we can just call them like approaches to solving that particular problem, right? So like, you know, GMOs help tackle one set of things, but then you can also say that, you know, like organic farming like tackles another set of problems, and they don't necessarily have to be diametrically opposed to each other. They can kind of work towards a common goal, right? I think it's like generally good to kind of take the approach of like, and to not take the approach of, okay, like, you know, you guys over there are crazy and these ideas are bad, 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 bad. And we here, we have it all figured out. It's more just like, oh, okay, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. And like, you know, these are things that we should be concerned about and that we need to look out for. But practically speaking, like maybe it's challenging for XYZ reasons, or like, you know, this approach that people are taking can be optimized by changing it in so on fashion, right? So it's not to completely, you know, you don't want to necessarily discredit the, you don't necessarily want to say that like, you know, everything is wrong about the other side, but just like contend with specific things that can be done better, or things that have been done poorly that you think like, need to be you know, changed, right? So I mean, that's just like I think a healthy mindset to take into things, especially like, you know, to avoid kind of the polarization that we often see in like online circles right now, right? Where it's just like people are becoming more divided because they're kind of cycling their thoughts kind of in one camp without really trying to understand what makes sense about the other camp, and being like, oh, okay, you know, and understanding that, you know, there may be weaknesses to your camp or the approach that you're taking. You want to point those out, be like, oh, hey, actually, you know, like for GMOs or for organic farming, there's like, you know, these problems that we have, and like we're not going to hide them. However, and then you can talk about, you know, maybe like things that, you know, are particularly good about those things. Yeah, just some advice on like a mindset shift for future debates, or just
Thank you, I
arguments.
completely agree. Yeah. Cheyenne, did you have any feedback that you wanted to share or points that you wanted to mention? If you're still there. Okay, that's all right. One thing that I did want to mention is that in debating, one of the first things that we learned is you have to make sure that you oppose the argument and not the person, and that's something I definitely did see. So I really am really glad how you guys formed your arguments, but also presented them in a way that you were specifically sticking to the topic. Because a lot of times I knew it wouldn't get that heated where it would become personal, but you guys were really respectful of that, so that made it much more effective.
Just like a general note, like always have like very high scrutiny of the sources that you're using. Generally, it's kind of nice when you just like, you know, like why GMO bad, or like why organic food good, or like why GMO great. Like you can kind of like Google these things and then like find stuff, and like it's always nice to be like, oh yeah, this is like saying what I like let's take that, right? Generally, you want to take a step back and be like, okay, like who's writing this stuff? What are their motivations? what is the what is the other forms of scrutiny that may have been put on this particular source of information before it was published. Very important things to consider. Otherwise, you risk spreading misinformation. And like everyone's kind of like guilty about this at some point. Like you know, it's easy to kind of just like pick up things that you see like support your arguments and then kind of go ahead and share those. But you always want to be very careful about that, right? Because it's dangerous to share things that have not been validated. I had another piece of feedback. Let me reflect on that. Some of the points, I took some notes and I can come back with some more.
Do we have any reflections from the video team? Observations, things you learned?
I don't have anything to add, but yeah, I think in general it was a very interesting debate, and I definitely learned a lot. And yeah, I think it was interesting to see all the different takes on this issue, especially with like the pro GMO like side, because I haven't really seen that talked about too much, like from that viewpoint. I think I might be wrong, but in the magazine there was like an article about it once. I think it was like for GMOs. I remember that was the only other time that I saw something like that. It made me think of that article.
Oh, okay. I remember one of the points that I did want to make, which was it kind of relate to something I had already mentioned, but you want to avoid something called the confirmation bias, right? So the confirmation bias is basically this idea that we have a tendency to only look for information that confirms our existing beliefs, right? To really test whether a point you're trying to make stands up, you want to try to beat that point down as much as possible. And if after you try to look for all sorts of resources or points to break apart an assumption or belief you have, and it still stands up after that, like that's the way to truly validate that something's really good. If you're only looking for stuff that supports it, then you kind of also open yourself up to further criticism because you're not aware of like the potential drawbacks or weaknesses that others are going to point out.
That's for sure. Thanks. One question I did want to ask to all the debaters, anyone of you can answer, is during your research, did you find that at any point your own opinion was changed or solidified because of what you found versus what you believed before? Or if you were indifferent, did you lean towards your side even more?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I went in with like nothing, like no information, no knowledge about anything. But I think it's such a new topic. Like even 10 years is not like an advanced it's not like an old research. So it was interesting to go into it and seeing like the pros and cons and fors and against and other implications as well. And so I think as a whole, it was kind of beneficial, but also yeah, I really enjoyed this debate. So really good points. So yeah, it was really fun.
For me, what happened was so my mom's very strict on the whole organic thing, but I was arguing the opposite. So it was very interesting trying to constantly rebut every single thing that I've been basically grown up with. So that was fun.
That's definitely a game changer, or like a development tool that I found is when you're forced to think against. And sometimes it's almost easier to tell other people why you're against it versus why you're for it. Because if you could argue, I've been just doing it for my whole life. Okay, but why? Oh, it's family, it's it's culture, but why? Whereas against it, you can be like, okay, here's the science, here's the proof. So I definitely agree with that. Vandana, you want anything to add?
Oh yeah, actually last year I was part of like a debate team in my high school, and I actually had to argue for like pro-organic. So it's kind of funny having to argue the other way, and like because every time I researched the point, I thought, oh well, I can counter it like this, So in a way, it kind of helped when I was making like rebuttals for the rebuttals, but yeah, it was just kind of weird, honestly.
So in a way, would you guys agree that it's easier to oppose your opponent's argument versus come up with arguments for why you're right?
I feel like it's Generally, yeah, it's generally easier to like oppose because there's always people like if especially if it's like a real world thing that a lot of people are doing, there's obviously gonna be people against it, right? So generally I found like for research, it's easier to find like against things.
I think also because it's such a like young field, you can't exactly, you don't like right now there's only fear mongering and like negative things and maybe a little amount of for GMO. So we have to like, you can kind of feed into the arguments that are fear mongering and like the great statistics and the great possible implications and everything, but and that can only be disproved with time. And so unless this field becomes even more well researched and more like funding goes into it, we won't really know the true negative impacts until a couple more decades.
Yeah, like a lot of the oh sorry.
No, keep going.
Okay, I was just gonna say like a lot of the scientific consensus, right? They're still undecided whether GMOs are actually more healthy or whether they're like the same health risk. So yeah.
Fatma, did you have anything to add to that?
I was gonna.
Oh, sorry. Wait,
No, keep going.
were you talking to me or Roa?
I was talking to you, but also if Roa had something, then yeah, because I don't know if your mic was on or not. But,
No. Roa can go ahead. I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay. I was gonna say I was gonna answer your original question, Joria. And I think it is a lot easier to argue against. So I actually did debate in high school as well, all 4 years. And what we were taught to do is like think of points the other person can say and how you can rebut them. But before they even have a chance to say it, already say it. So like they don't even have a chance to say their points properly. So that's actually what we did because Nabil was working with us, and that's actually what we did with the definitions as well. So I tried constructing the definitions to a very strict-ish thing that you guys wouldn't really have a lot of leeway to work with. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Anyone else? Yusuf, Ibrahim, anything that you found either change your opinion or something that you found that really either helped you or deterred you from coming up with arguments or anything?
So yeah, for me, like my family is mostly organic. Like we're not like huge on GMOs, and so arguing for GMO was pretty different for me. But it also helped me like broaden my insight on GMOs because I just thought that like organic is everything and GMOs are just like this one tiny thing that's not good for you and you should never go there. But now I know a lot more about GMOs, so I can like make decisions for myself.
That's awesome. I'm gonna go check where, not go, but I'm gonna check where the judges are at right now. Feel free to go hydrate yourselves if you need to, or a stretch, whatever you need.
Okay, do we have everybody here? Turn on your videos if you're here, please. I'm gonna let the judges go, Jennifer and Nicola. Give your feedback, announce the winners. We'll take a few minutes to give you guys feedback, and then we'll watch the video, and then we'll mark that. And then at the end, we're gonna have an overall one person who did the best in whatever, each 3 teams.
So they're going to announce the winners for the debate right now.
What's that? Yeah, there is a feedback and the announcement for the debate winner. All right, ladies, you'll have to unmute.
All right, you guys did a fantastic job. That was so impressive. I think everyone obviously put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into researching this. I was saying to the judges that I would have gotten lost long before in the rabbit hole of all the things you guys researched, and you were able to go to the economy, to health, to crops, to food science, to biotech. Like, it was a really broad spectrum debate, and you should all be very proud of all the work that you presented. The teams were evenly matched. I really loved the showdowns between each team and what each person brought to the table, with a lot of fascinating arguments, a lot of passion, some incredible rhetoric. I don't know how many people have been studying how to lecture and do speeches, but you guys are really nailing this. So I'd really like to point out Roa versus Malaika. A lot of rhetoric, a lot of passion brought into those arguments, and a lot of data. There was so much. I was learning a lot from each of you and what you brought forward in that. I think the arguments of Team A were really strong, and I was definitely, sitting forward and listening and reevaluating my own opinions on, really, there was some information that I hadn't heard before, some information that maybe wasn't as accurate as other pieces, but still delivered in a very effective, passionate, and well-structured way. So good job to all of you. I found both sides fascinating. I was trying not to Google while you were talking, because there was just like, oh, really? That's so interesting. Now I'll turn it over to Nicola.
Yeah, well done, everybody. That was really, really good. My apologies to you all personally for showing up late and having tech issues on my end. When I did come in, I was just like pretty blown away by the arguments that you were bringing up. The way that you were presenting and speaking was really articulate, really clear, really, really well formed. There were a couple points that I wanted to share. I really appreciated the conversation around breeding versus gene splicing and the difference with GMOs. There was a lot of kind of back and forth on that, especially with Malaika and Yusuf and Roa. I really liked that you guys got into that topic. I think there was a little bit of confusion about like what the difference really is with breeding versus actually gene splicing, and sort of some of the like history and the science behind some of those practices specifically. But I thought it was just like really great that you were talking about that you brought it up, and it was central to the discussion. I had a kind of a question with Roa in terms of like the never goes hungry argument. I really, like, same with Jen, just really appreciated how much passion you all had with this debate. It was really beautiful. And then, but like with that one, I was kind of like, okay, like I wonder about that in terms of like, are GMOs really necessary for getting there? And when you brought up the question of like, of needing and wanting to feed our brothers and sisters, all of them, I was like, okay. And then also, what about the non-human brothers and sisters that we have? And I would have liked to see the argument touch in a little bit more on the ecological health as well. So that kind of just brought me into this contact that I wanted to leave you with. There's just two women that I wanted to give you guys access to continue to research if you want on your own. And this one's, her name's Dr. Vandana Shiva. And she does a lot with seeds, specifically with talking about feeding people and the discussion of who controls the land and who controls the seed, being a lot about community resilience. And she talks specifically about GMOs and heritage seeds. And so I just wanted to bring that in with that part of the debate. There was also the topic that was brought up by Roa as well. You had so many good ones. And this was about growing being a science. And it was kind of a lot about that in the GMO group as well, of this science approach being the approach forward. And of course, I'm a bit biased in my background and my farming practices, so there's that. But just bringing that part in and like wondering again with the other group, could it have been debated a little bit more of like, is growing really just science? And this is something that I just spoke to with Nargis in the judges room, where there's a concept of two-eyed seeing. And the woman I want to point you to, her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she talks a lot about bridging between traditional ecological knowledge and scientific approach. And that was something where I know you guys are in a debate, so you have to like rebuttal and go back and forth and take really specific sides. But I just want to share that there's a lot that could be bridged in this topic, in this discussion, when we bring both the science and the traditional ecological knowledge of where we're growing, what the ecosystem is, and who we are as humans as part of nature into that discussion. So I just wanted to say those things. Are there any more points? The conversation around the economics and business was really interesting as well. I really appreciated that. I know it couldn't get like too far into the organic topic, but talking about like regenerative farming, ecological farming, like when and where does GMO play into those concepts? Yeah, overall, just amazing. Really, really good. That's what I have to say.
Do you guys want to just announce who you selected as the final team?
Yes, we selected Team B, the anti-GMO team. But I wanted to put out there that I've done debating before, and you guys really had it together in terms of teamwork. Both of your teams, no one was repeating anyone else's point. When you were doing rebuttals, you were bringing up fresh material. That was very appreciated. So good work behind the scenes as well to both the teams. And congratulations to Team B.
A and B both. Wonderful, yes. So you all know that even though we are doing this as a team versus team, we also have points for the people who did their work, and based on that 80% or more, we are going to come back to you with what special prizes you do have. So let's first go into our video segment, which is also our third segment. And Sakina and Sif, if you wanted to just say something or just start presenting, that would be great.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So before I start, I just want to say the debate team did a really good job, and congrats to the winners. That was really fun to watch. So we made this video, and it kind of just sums up the 2 urban gardening workshops we had in the past month. And yeah, I'll just share it.
Urban gardening is a fun, easy, and relatively new way to connect with gardening. Through our 2 sessions with Maison Vert, My Voice Youth learned about various techniques to growing greens, both indoors and outdoors. We live in a capitalist society where, in most cases, profit is put over the consumer's own health and well-being. This has been the reality for quite some time, but it is true that things are changing. While healthier alternatives to a lot of the stuff that we eat are starting to pop up, they usually aren't accessible to the majority. The techniques that we learned in this video about urban gardening, however, are ones that almost anyone can start learning in order to make fresh greens accessible to themselves. I remember watching a film about Regent Park, a public housing community in Toronto. In the film, they spoke about a community garden in Regent Park and the impact that it had on the residents there. It was wonderful to see healthy and fresh food become accessible to the residents, to have food grown within the community for the community. So it's nice to see innovation being made within our spaces to ensure gardening and healthy eating is accessible to all communities and people. As Muslims, it's also important to understand the benefits to urban gardening that apply to our Iman. In today's world, we often waste food and resources without putting too much thought into it, but being wasteful is a quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes. Urban gardening allows us to grow food for ourselves or our communities, and that'll hopefully push us to buy less at the grocery store and to eat out less. We often overconsume meat, sugar, and a lot of other things that we shouldn't be having. So the amount of greens that urban gardening will bring into our diet will hopefully help us have more balanced meals overall. For the first workshop session, we were provided with a variety of different microgreen seeds to choose to grow. Our first kits came with arugula, cabbage, mustard, pea, radish, and sunflower seeds. With such a variety of microgreens to choose to grow from, it's really important to understand the different needs that each microgreen will have. For example, cabbage seeds need to be soaked 4 to 6 hours before they're planted and have to be kept in the dark for around 2 to 3 days until germinated. Arugula, on the other hand, should not be soaked and only needs to be kept in the dark for a day, and in some cases 2. Microgreens such as sunflowers, which are much more complicated to grow, require you to have a solid understanding of the seed for you to be able to meet its needs.
The soil method for growing microgreens is a very easy and straightforward process, which only consists of 2 steps. I used this method to grow the pea seeds, which actually turned out really well. All you need for this method is a shallow container like this, along with your microgreens and your soil. Start off by adding a 1 to 2 inch layer of soil inside the container, or as much as you think would be good. Then take some of your microgreens and just spread them across the surface of the soil. Make sure to not add too many and keep spaces in between them for room to grow. Mist the soil and leave it in a dark place for the seeds to germinate, and once they germinate, leave them in a sunny place and keep watering them consistently every day. This is a very common gardening method that can be done easily at home any time of the day.
The paper towel method is an easier and quicker method to the soil method, and is my personal favorite because of how convenient it is. I was able to grow a small batch of arugula microgreens using this method. At first, I didn't fill my container up with enough water and the paper towel kept losing moisture, but later on I got the hang of it. I plan to use the method more moving forward to grow the rest of my microgreen seeds throughout the year. To get started on growing your microgreens with this method, first make sure to get a container that has a flat lid. Make sure the surface of the lid has a wide enough area to grow a decent amount of microgreens. Next, you need to fill your container up with water. I recommend filling it up about 2/3. Now, before you close your lid, wrap the paper towel around the lid and push the lid onto the container. Alternatively, you can also create 2 holes in your container and put the towel through, but I find the first option easier. Now, take another paper towel and put it over the lid. This increases the surface that you cover. Place your seeds over the surface and leave it in a dark area until the leaves emerge. Remember to fill up the container as it runs out of water.
In the second workshop, we were taught how to garden indoors and how to clone. I feel like indoor gardening is more useful, especially over here since the weather is cold for more than half of the year. This also makes gardening much easier because you are able to have more control over your plants than you normally would. When gardening indoors, here's a list of things you will always need to get started: light, humidity, water, air circulation, and temperature. The air circulation prevents mold and fungus from growing on your plants, and the temperature should be ranging from about 15 to 20 degrees depending on the plant that you are trying to grow. This is just the bare minimum of what you need to grow your plants, but also the most important. Watering plants. Improper watering is a huge setback to gardening and can ruin the plant you are trying to grow. Here are some signs to tell if you are either over or under watering your plants. Signs of overwatering. Overwatering your plants can cause wilting from the stem towards leaves, the lower leaves falling off, discoloration, and if the overall plant stops growing in general. Signs of underwatering. This can cause the leaves' outer tips to wilt and the edges to start turning brown, the soil becoming too dry, and if the leaves or flowers start dropping early.
Jumping from growing indoors to outdoors is a big step, but it's obviously an important one if you wish to continue to learn about gardening by gaining that experience yourself. If you wish to grow outdoors in the summer, you have 3 options to choose from. 1, by growing through a flatbed, 2, by growing through a raised bed, or by container gardening. The first 2 options work better if you have a backyard, and the last one is more so if you live in a condo or apartment, or you don't wish to plant as much. Planting outdoors is a year-round project. In the winter, you'll be planning out your garden and beginning to grow indoors. In the spring, you'll prepare your garden and move your seeds outdoors. Then, in the fall and summer, your plants will begin to be ready for harvest. After understanding that, you need to understand the following about the space that you're growing in. Water. Water is really important, so it's important to understand the relationship that water has to the space. Knowing how close a hose or sink is to the space that you're growing in is important because it'll really make your watering life easier. Sunlight. Most plants require 6 to 8 hours of sunlight to prosper and keep insects and diseases away, so it's important to be in a space where sunlight is available. Finally, soil. Rich, moist, and well-drained soil with sufficient nutrients is also vital in promoting healthy plant growth. Aside from that, there are 2 other considerations that you do need to keep in mind: climate and light. Knowing your climate zone is really important because it provides guidance on what vegetables will do well in your space and which ones won't. Light applies more to direction. You need to understand where the best spot is for growing your plants. It's important to aim for a south-facing spot that gets, like mentioned before, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight.
These workshops were a wonderful experience for many of us. And honestly, I think I may have learned more about gardening during these 2 workshops than I have in my entire life. From microgreens to cloning, we learned it all. In the past, I never really took an interest in gardening, but I definitely do now. Taking care of a plant almost feels like taking care of an actual child. And I think I speak on behalf of many people when I say this was a great opportunity for us that we don't often have. Thank you, Sister Nergis, for making this possible, and thank you so much to the presenters who planned out these workshops for us. I hope others can also learn from this experience and use this information to help them in their own gardening adventures.
Wow, that was great. Are you guys done? Wonderful.
Wow, thank you so much.
That could be used in so many places to teach people how to start your microgreens. And yeah, that's a great video. MashaAllah. All right, so I'm just gonna take our 2 judges back. We'll be back maybe in 3 to 4 minutes. I don't think it'll take that long. Meanwhile, you guys can stretch and then we'll announce a few things. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Did the judges receive the invitation for the breakout room? Okay, let me let her know.
Nicola, listen to me. Go to the bottom of your screen. Do you see the join breakout room button with 4 little squares? Press on that, then press on join breakout room.
for anyone else who is still here, I just want to say another thank you to Sarah and Sakina for putting that together. It definitely, I gotta agree with Sakina, like these two workshops taught me much more than what I have learned in my entire life about gardening. And I was very hesitant about it because I know it's hard, but it really made it easier. And I love how you put it so concisely into like such a quick video. So thank you for that. If anyone else has any feedback, comments, feel free to share them.
I just want to echo, I thought it was a great video, really educational. I learned a couple little things about, growing plants in the backyard at home as well. Are you guys planning to put this, or maybe it already is, on YouTube and share it more broadly?
I think they might just do that, like on behalf of my voice.
Cool, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Mhm.
All right, Nicola and Jen, go ahead.
So the video, amazing. That, like, the graphics were great. I don't know if you created those graphics or if you found them, but they just looked seamless. The pacing was fantastic. The voiceovers were just wonderful. I loved how you closed it at the end with some personal experiences. I really loved the full journey that video took us on.
Yeah, I agree with Jen. That presentation was really well done. I really liked the graphics you guys included, and I don't know how you did that, but I really liked it. I thought it was really beautiful that you said to really know the seeds and how it just kind of brings up how much importance there is in having a relationship with each plant that you begin to grow. Your favorite methods in there as well, so making it kind of personal is really nice. The little bit about knowing how, if you're underwatering or overwatering was really cool. And I also just want to say that's like the beginning of what people refer to as plant communication. So like really listening to your plants in that way and beginning to understand them by knowing when they look like this, what are they saying to you? What are they communicating that they need? And then also going into water, sunlight, soil, water, it's so endless in terms of what you can really begin to know about it. Like, what's the source? What's the quality of the water too? So those are some things that I was thinking about. Sunlight, I like that you mentioned zoning, and also like what aspect is your balcony facing? Is it facing east? Is it facing west? How many hours in a day do you have sunlight there? And then soil, also amazing. That was brought in, discussed, and then I just want to open that a little bit more too and say not just like NPK or these like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus in our soils. We want to think about soils as a living food web. So a whole biome of life in the soil. So thinking about that too as you're beginning to transition from your indoor to your outdoor growing, just as my encouragement to you. And then also just the ending was really nicely done with a lot of appreciation, and whoever your teachers were, I think I know who they were, but I think they would be really be really happy to see that video too, and just feel really proud in themselves for having done a good job teaching you and having had that time opportunity to spend with you as well. So good job.
Yes, good job. And so the judges did choose an overall person across the teams who made it to the top participant, and that was Roa. So congratulations, Roa. Your arguments, just the way you carried yourself, the things you said were just wonderful. And I just wanted to ask the video team as well, because you got like full scores on everything. Who did what? I just wanted to know who did the graphics and how did you make it move like that and all of that, you know.
The background graphics, Safe did those, most of the animations, and then I kind of put the whole thing together and added extra animations and the text and everything, and more pictures. So yeah.
That's great. It was a great team effort. So you will be look out for your emails today for some great gifts for all of you.
Thank
I
you.
definitely saw great teamwork because it looked like it just flowed perfectly as if one person made it.
And thank you to your mentors who helped you. I think that was great. Nabil and Javeria and Cheyenne, you guys did a great job with your teams. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola and Jen, for being here today, for giving us 2 hours of your time. I really appreciate it. And yes, if you are all interested in the projects that they both do, want to take maybe any of the courses. I don't know if Jen, you offer anything, but Nicola, I know, does a medicinal herbs thing. Just let me know and I can always send you their contacts. All right. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.